actually, I take it as a real attack on everything that I've always believed in, the core of the values that I've got. And also, it's just an attack on my whole family's history of fighting against what Israel's doing. Right at the beginning of this, I thought, well, where's the Arab voice? Where's the Palestinian voice in this? Why isn't anybody asking about that? And in saying that, and actually there wasn't any real opposition being voiced in the media from the black community at all. Partly because the media was suppressing it, but also because it was quite worrying. The attacks. If you tried to say anything in solidarity with the Palestinians, there was this risk of being accused of being anti-Semitic and being twisted in incredible ways. So, for example, when Naz Shah, who was one of the first to be attacked, and I think Roland referred to this, David Cameron made an unbelievable statement in the Commons, where he was defended by Commons privilege and so on. But it's claiming that Naz Shah is putting up this fairly harmless, almost jokey thing, which was implying that Israel was really part of the US and carrying out US policies, turning it into saying that she was arguing for the transportation of Jews just as the Nazis did. I mean, it was incredible, unbelievable twisting of things. And actually, I saw it as a deep insult to the victims of the Holocaust, because, to compare a little thing like that to what happened in the Holocaust is actually demeaning the horror of what happened in the Holocaust. So anyway, but this has led to a lot of Palestinians and other supporters feeling cowed. Now, the people I really am grateful to is all those anti-Zionist Jews who got involved in free speech for Israel, Jews for Labour and so on, who stuck their neck out even though they've been accused of being false Jews and all that sort of, in my view, racist rubbish. But I've been really grateful that they've taken up the fight and shown their humanity and anti-racism, which has been in strong contrast to some of the other side, if you like. But people like Roland were encouraging me to speak out and say we need to get Palestinian voices and so on. And when I finally broke it, decided I had to say something, was when Richard Angel, the director, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but anyway, he's a fallen angel, but the director of Progress, put some disgraceful stuff out, saying that we had to really take up all this anti-Semitism, and then started taking the IHRA definition, which I think Roland referred to, started taking it to a further level, and saying that if Zionism was used as a pejorative word, a term of abuse, then that was anti-Semitism, or comparing Israel to apartheid was anti-Semitism. Well, I'd like to, and in fact, John Mann has also said that if Zionism is used too angrily, then that's anti-Semitism. I'd just like to ask them, how angry am I allowed to get when I see people being shot who are unarmed in the Gaza, when I see the poverty that Palestinians are being forced to live in Gaza, when I see medics being shot and members of the press being shot in Gaza? How angry are you allowed to get then? But anyway, he put this thing out and also argued that people who are found guilty, in inverted commas, of anti-Semitism would have to be put through training led by the Jewish Labour Movement, which is a wing of the Israeli Labour Party, and has become increasingly just a boast piece for the Israeli government, which is the most right-wing Israeli government you could imagine, which is hard to imagine, but you could imagine that. Anyway, so I put a piece on Facebook, which I told my partly personal story of my life, because my father was Palestinian, and he was studying in Britain in 1948, and he tried to get back when the fighting was going on, and he arrived in Beirut because that was the way they got back, because he came from near Nazareth, and Beirut is actually not that far from the north of Israel. Anyway, and because news flowed slower then, he was told by the bus that he tried to get on that, no, you can't get in there because the Israelis have taken it. Now, Nazareth was originally part of the partition agreement, was not Israeli. It was going to be in the Palestinian Arab state. So he couldn't get back then. Anyway, he eventually finished his study, got his PhD, and eventually got offered a job with the United Nations in America, in the US. At that time, it was shortly after the 1948 and the founding of Israel. At that time, America decided that it wouldn't recognize his passport, which was a British mandate Palestinian passport. Britain continued to recognize it because they had given it out, but it wasn't recognized, so he couldn't use it to travel to the US, take the job. So he thought he would go and try and see if he could get Israeli nationality, because now his home, where he was born and brought up, was underneath Israel. And he went to the Israeli embassy in London and asked to be given a passport. And they said, no, you're not, you're a refugee. And he said, I'm not a refugee, and what's that got to do with it anyway? But I was actually studying. He showed them a copy of his scholarship that he had to study in Britain and so on, his visa to go to Britain and where he was. No, you're a refugee, you're not allowed to go back. Yet if he had been Jewish, or any British Jewish person, or any Jewish person from anywhere in the world, they would automatically, no connection to Palestine, to that area, no connection at all, they would have automatically been allowed to go back. But him being an Arab, despite the fact he was born there, brought up there, no right to go back. And I said, to me, that's a definition of a racist state. When people who are born and bred in a country are not allowed to go back because they're not of the right ethnic group or ethno-religious group, that is racism. And in fact, that's the founding of apartheid. It's similar to the old pass laws in South Africa. And yet, from saying that Israel was a racist endeavor, was to use the phraseology that's in the IOHA definition, saying that means that on that definition, if you took the whole definition, including the bits at the bottom of it, the sort of illustrations, I would be automatically accused of being anti-Semitic, which is just utterly ludicrous, because it means that every Palestinian who has a family story, because there are millions who've got family stories like that, like mine, is automatically declared an anti-Semite. And it's a definition like that must be racist, because you're automatically saying that every Palestinian is anti-Semitic, because their experience is one of being racism from Israel. So anyway, I put this up on a Facebook post, and I got an incredible response from it, with over 450 shares and so on. So I decided, to keep on speaking up about it, and this is part of doing that. And why it personally gets me really angry, besides, I could talk about the broad political points, which I'm sure have already been made by the other two speakers. But why it personally gets really angry is because despite what happened to my father, despite that, we were always in the family brought up to oppose all forms of racism. And my father used to say, and you've got to make a special effort to oppose anti-Semitism, because it was the anti-Semitism in Europe, the Holocaust and so on, that brought about the creation of Israel. And that was the message that was driven home. And it wasn't just talk from his point of view, because I don't want to take up too much time, because when he was in his job in the UN in the US, this was in the early 1950s, and it was the height of the McCarthyite area, he had a knock on his door, and there was a guy from the FBI turned up, said, I want to talk to somebody who's in your team. And my father said, you've got no jurisdiction here, but I will talk to you because the UN building is not part of the US, and so FBI has no jurisdiction there. But he said, I'll go and talk to you in the cafe bar outside. And then it turned out that the guy they wanted to talk about was a Jewish guy in his team who was married to the daughter, or one of the daughters of G.D.H. Cone, who those who are steeped in British Labour history will know that he was besides being a detective story writer, he was a big socialist. So my father, besides defending him, just turned to the FBI agent and said, you've come here thinking that I will badmouth, that term didn't exist in those days, I will denounce a member of my team because he's Jewish, because you know that I'm a Palestinian who's been not allowed to go back, and you think that I will turn on somebody
too hot again?
No, this is connection loss. Okay, let me try another connection.
Italy. Yeah, I realised that. I was just going to give a minute or two just to see if
BCC free Wi-Fi. I'll try it again.
BCC said he's got to stop at well, yeah, indeed. I'm aware that there's only 9 minutes.
Is it possible to make a call directly from your phone?
I'll try. I'll trying again. We'll try this, and then if it doesn't work, that's it. Okay.
I think we should do that because if people have the WhatsApp as well.
Oh, Chris has to leave in 10 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
No, I don't think we're going to work if my phone